Okay, if you're sure.
Yes, I am.
Thank you. I suppose where I'm coming from this more than anything is to make sure that children are, if at all possible, are stopped from medical transition. I think that's the most important thing for me. After that, I'm very, very focused on you can't have a civilized society without free speech and being able to debate issues. After that, I would be concerned about safe spaces for women. So, I'm quite clear about my priorities. And I know feminists have that very differently, but I think I have to honour my feelings as much as feminists who are more, I suppose, engaged with the women's spaces point, they have to honour their way. And I think that's great, because I think we need to have women protecting their spaces. And I certainly support them and have done, and only sent into a submission to the Irish government a few days ago on exactly that point. And I just fundamentally and completely focus totally on women's spaces. So I am into this issue, but I do prioritise others. You kind of have to. If you're going to get anything done, you kind of have to be really quite clear in where you're really going to put your energy. And to me, all society always has to look after the children first. It's so important. And so why am I interested in autogynephilia? It's primarily because I'm meeting teenage autogynephiles. And I need to be able to understand what's happening with them. And I am more and more, I was very interested when Debbie Hayton was speaking with us in the podcast, because I thought, wow, the way she's talking, it's a compulsion. This is a compulsion. And it came over her like a compulsion. And I know people will be very annoyed with me using pronouns, but then I'm very annoyed with people when they try to compel my speech. So I'm going to do me, and I'll let everybody else do them. And so, yeah, I was very, very interested when Debbie was talking about that, and I thought this is key to my understanding when I'm talking to somebody who's maybe 15 years old and is autogynephilic and has no idea what's going on except get out of my way, I need to be a woman. And that child is not able to articulate what the hell is going on. They don't have the verbal ability to that, they don't have the conceptual maturity. And I have to try and figure out, how do we help this fast increasing number? This is not like the Ray Blanchard numbers. This is a very fast, very quickly increasing number of boys. Now, are they ROGD? Are they AGP? Or frankly, are they what I think, a mix between AGP and ROGD? And I think the AGP is porn-induced. And I'm really, really interested in this, and I think this is crucial. I think many of us who's here will have seen the video of that boy talking to the therapist.
Yes.
And he had transitioned, and it was devastating. And these are the kids. Those kids are all over the place. And they need help, and they need a lot of help. And I'm willing to talk to everybody who can help my understanding with that. And if people say, well, you shouldn't talk to somebody, I just look at them straight back in the eye and say, yes, I should. Because my job is to try and understand things so that I can help people. That's my job. And for some people to say, well, that offends me, I'm like, well, I'm not forcing you to listen to me talking. I'm just very much interested in promoting knowledge so that we can understand a massively under-researched and misunderstood condition. And so I think, yeah, give me it all. Give me everything. And yes, I would, by the way, if I was. Yes, without a doubt, and I have done already, spoken to many paedophiles. I'm very, very, very interested in what they've got to say, because that will help me. And it will also help me to help kids. And that's the primary kind of reason I'm standing here talking to you. So I'm literally bemused that on some level, there's some sort of attacks going on because I said, give a chance to Artie Morty, insofar as because Artie Morty's had 2 weeks of being told he's a paedophile apologist, he's an AGP apologist, he's a bully himself, he's silencing women, when I would say, no, I don't actually agree with any of those things. I think he's trying to do the right thing in the way that he thinks. I think there's 7 billion people in the world who are all trying to do it in their own way. Most of us are making a bags of it, me included. And I don't think it helps our cause to fragment and to focus completely on one version of events over another. And for people to say kind of, let's say, with full confidence that they know AGP isn't innate and stuff like that, I've no idea whether AGP is innate or not. Why? Because I don't have autogynephilia. I never had it. So I'm kind of going, if some people are saying it is and some people are saying it isn't, my feeling is it's developmental. I don't really care whether it's innate or not because I don't think that absolves anybody. I don't think that's the point. The compulsion is a much more important psychological point, because if you look at paedophilia, it's a compulsion. It gets them. And how do we get in the way of somebody who has a compulsion that actually seriously, negatively wrecks other people's lives? How do we stop that? And that's why I'm very much seeking to absorb all the knowledge available. And I don't think anybody who thinks they know their stuff about this should take a deep breath and do a bit more reading, because you can't. Because it's one of the most under-researched, misinterpreted, misinformed concepts that's out there. So, if you think you know it, I think that's basically, you've got a lot more to learn. It's a suggestion immediately that you don't know how complex it is, because this is a significantly, very difficult concept to understand. So that's where I'm at.
Well, I think your work is very important, and I think we disagree about certain aspects of autogynephilia, or at least we come at it from a very different perspective. I think it's really important to learn about it, but not that women should have to. But having learned about it, it's only made me more concerned about the risk in women's faces and to children. So when we have sort of calls for empathy for autogynephiles, I still don't really know what exactly that entails or means. Like, what kind of empathy are you asking for from women and girls, or just women, towards these people? Because a lot of us have human empathy for them anyway, but we are very concerned with women's rights and children's rights and all of these things that are intersecting with this because of autogynephilia, or at least is being driven by autogynephilia. So what part of our energy, what sort of energy do you want us to give to that sort of empathy? Like, what is the request here? That's what I always wonder.
I don't think you need to give any empathy at all. None. Zero. I think I should, because I'm trying to understand them.
Yeah,
and because I'm don't forget, I'm working with children who are autogynephilic.
When you say children, what sort of ages are you talking?
Anything from puberty onwards. It's porn-induced.
Does that mean that in your...
Teenage, 13, 14, 15. And it seems to be porn-induced. Is it porn-induced? I don't know. Would it have arrived anyway? I don't know. Are the numbers shockingly high in the teenage boy population? They seem to be to me. But is this actually just something that was always under the covers? I don't know. But I don't think you should have any empathy. And I haven't asked anybody to have any empathy. And I don't think you should have empathy or sympathy. I think definitely feminists need to fight their corner, and I'm delighted they do. And I'm behind them all the way. I'm not leading, because that's not my focus, but I'm behind them all the way. You've got to. And that's why I said some tweet along to that effect. Like, the feminists need to be protecting their spaces, and they do it well. I don't think you need any empathy at all. But that doesn't mean that, like, why I was saying about Artie Morty, I was like, kind of, that's a vulnerable guy. And, there's been an awful lot of tweets for 2 weeks. And sometimes I've been mobbed a few times on Twitter, and it's always been for standing up for somebody. I was mobbed for standing up for Graham Linehan. I was mobbed for standing up for Ciara Kelly, who many of you won't know, but she's Irish, and I probably got my worst mobbing for that one. And then now this, the third one, which is standing up for Artie Morty. So I don't like when there's pylons. I just think it's not nice. I think there's better ways to kind of get the point across. When you've made a point, when the point has been made to somebody over thousands of tweets, it's like that, point made. Even if this was the devil, I'd be saying, yeah, point made. Move on.
I think the reason people haven't moved on is because it still hasn't been addressed and they think it matters. And people keep characterising the women who are talking about this as bullies and mean and all these things. But I'm speaking to quite a lot of these women and they're just genuinely concerned. I haven't heard them saying nasty things about Archie as an individual in my inbox. They're talking about what they see as genuine concerns. They're talking about the fact that having raised genuine concerns, they're just automatically called like a purity spiral or, a cancel culture or whatever. Like, it's the way they're addressed is not very helpful, because if you think our concerns are ridiculous, because I have some of these concerns too, you should just talk to us. Because a good faith, like you're doing now, really, but a good faith conversation would probably resolve it. But when someone has a concern and they raise it, and then your attitude is sort of hostile.
You're right.
Stuff. It's made me more concerned. And I'm like a dog with a bone when I get really concerned because I don't want to let it go in case it's really important. But conversation.
You're making really good points. I do think that there is what's the word when somebody it becomes very reactive, and so if I say, let's say she in terms of Debbie, there's just utter war immediately, and I'm like, okay, well, back the hell off and compelling my speech. And so I'm becoming reactive, if you follow me. And then it turns into Northern Ireland, you know what I mean, very quickly. And there's factions everywhere and everybody's at war. And I just think, man, we really have done so well as a movement. It's been so, so difficult. And we're coming at it from loads of different points. That's why I make the Northern Ireland analogy, because there's so many political parties there. You can't keep up with it. Nobody has a clue what's going on because there's so many different complex points to make. And it becomes impenetrable except for those who are very much in the know, and everybody else just stays out of it. And I think we should learn from that. It's happened many times in many different contexts. And if at all possible, we should say, my enemy's enemy is my friend. And if we've got a common goal, there's some level of, don't agree with you, Artie, don't like what you said, going to leave you to it because I like 95% of what you say. As opposed to, I don't agree with you, don't like what you said, and now I'm going to call you a paedophile apologist. I just think it's such an unlikely jump that it means sense has gone for me. That's what it means.
From my perspective, I agree that we should be able to disagree with people. And some of the most valuable voices in this for me are people that I don't really agree with on a lot of things. But with this specifically, my interactions with Artie were always really positive. I've spoken to him on Zoom, one-on-one. I've spoken to him in group Zooms. I'd always got along with him. So for me, it's not about his personality, which people will have different opinions on. But I genuinely think that the things that people have flagged are things that were worth flagging and at least worth discussing. And I feel like it's now become about his personality when it shouldn't be. It should be about, okay, is this a problem? Because you can't tell if something's a problem on whether you like a person, right? That has nothing to do with whether something is a concerning thing or not a concerning thing. It impacts how you feel about it.
I get you. And you're making really good points. So I'm just trying to think, imagine if this happens again, which it inevitably will. Imagine a different person, and this person is called John, and we have to make him a male to make this fit. So imagine John, who we know and like and we agree with most of what he says, and then he says something that we don't agree with. What should happen? I've been thinking about it for the last 2 weeks because I've been watching it with Artie. He's gone. He's off Twitter. He's just, very distressed. So what should we have done? Because I get it. You're right. Those points needed to be made, and they need to be made assertively and strongly, and certainly repetitively to a point. But how should we conduct ourselves? I'm asking aloud in my mind. I don't know, but so that it's not thousands of tweets to the same person who's deeply distressed by what they said.
Well, I think if it's just a disagreement, when someone gets distressed, we should disengage. Because if it's a disagreement, it's not worth anyone being that unhappy. But this isn't about disagreement. This is about, I won't even call them red flags because people don't know what to think of it. But they're little things that are flagged up that strike me as not quite normal, and therefore we should discuss them. not to demonize him, but because we would discuss it if the other side did it. We'd be really hot on it if the other side had done some of these things. We have to maintain that principle of, oh, I'm not sure about this. Especially when this person is a person of prominence who is running like the LGBA Canada. Especially also when some of the people coming to us are from Canada and they have no other representation. I just feel like we should take that very seriously. And how I would have liked us to have dealt with it was, I mean, I reached out to all the people like the LGB Alliance and Graham Linehan and stuff behind the scenes. I sent them like long letters because I write a lot. But I was very gentle to them. Like I wasn't demanding they take a specific action, except talk to him and sort this out. I would have liked, as someone who is, you know, not in a particularly prominent position here, to have been able to go to those who are, lay out my concerns and have them treated seriously and responded to. And I would like everyone in the movement to be able to do that, because I do feel like we're a movement. And I feel like if we have a concern, we should expect it to be treated with respect, even if people disagree, if it's something serious. And now, of course, it's all over Twitter and it's a whole thing. But
oh, it's so bad.
That's
yeah, and I'm just imagining what that would look like. So imagine if you and if hundreds of people, and I don't know if this happened, all contacted, let's say, LGB Alliance Canada or something, and would each person should have been replied to in detail? Is this how it?
Well, I mean,
privately.
I have no idea. I mean, I don't know that there were hundreds of us who contacted. I don't know, but I think the complete silence. I mean, I was talking to other people who had also contacted, and they also got silence. So that presumes that there is just silence in response, and it's hard to know what to do with that. And then some women decided to write an open letter, and it's all sort of escalated a bit more. But there's also the feeling of what else can people do if people won't engage with them when they're trying to be their fairest. So it's very complicated. But
it is. Because my feeling, I think that's very interesting, because my feeling of the silence would be kind of akin to my own, which was, I didn't really know. I looked at it and I knew everybody was really, really upset by the tweet, but I thought, wow, his friend died by suicide. It was AGP. And I immediately went, because loads of my friends have died by suicide. That's, whoa. And that's where I went. While other people went completely different direction and said that was weaponizing suicide. And I didn't think it was weaponizing suicide. I thought that is somebody who's upset about his friend dying. And they've been triggered into this kind of, do you know what I mean? And I honestly, that was my response. Now, I can only be truthful and say that was my response. Had I said that out loud, and I've no doubt people are furious that I'm saying it now and are probably going to get very annoyed with me later on and send me a lot of messages. But I can't legislate for my response. That was my immediate emotional reaction. I've had a lot of friends die by suicide, and I went, oh, whoa, oh. And so I would imagine there was an awful lot of people who were like me who didn't know what they thought, because when it got understood in a very different way, I went, oh, geez, I don't know what I think now, because my response was completely different. And then people were messaging me that he had some reference to some Roman gay couple in his biog, and this was proof that he was a paedophile. I was just going, well, now we're losing the run of ourselves. Like, we're just losing the run of ourselves now. And now it's just escalated into extraordinarily high emotional kind of extremities that makes me think, this isn't right. And there's somebody in the middle of this who's a good person, who I don't know him very well, but I don't think you'd need to be a genius to say, I would imagine it's quite vulnerable. And it's like, wow. And I'm not seeing people as male or female. I'm seeing them as people here. I just don't tend to see through the prism of the feminist theory. I just don't. Okay, that's the way I am. I can't be anybody else than who I am. I can't help how I responded to that tweet. I can't pretend I responded in a different way.
Well, I don't.
So I'd imagine the silence was just literally, I don't know what to do.
Well, I mean, I didn't message the LGBT Alliance about his tweet, about his friend, or the Bloodlust tweet, because that is what I considered
What's the bloodlust tweet?
Well, he said that a lot of rad firms deeply wanted anyone with AGP to be dead. I didn't message them about that because that is what I would consider online debacles, right? You know, that's online debacles. We all say things online to varying degrees of serious that I don't think you should be messaging organisations about. The reason I messaged the LGBT Alliance was because of the Hadrian and Antinous thing and the discussion about the paedophile. And
what is this Hadrian and Antinous? Please. Well, I looked it up and I thought ancient Roman gay couple.
The reason it's probably words. Okay, so it's the thing about it is that it's a story from ancient Rome. So it's a very long time ago, but it's a true story. It's about Hadrian who built the wall and Antinous who was his sex slave, although the sex slave relationship was weird in ancient Rome in that they educated them first. The older men who were like in their 40s, 50s, like Hadrian was nearly 50, he first apparently saw sight of Antinous when Antinous was 11. And by the time he was 12 or 13, he was going to bed with him, he was raping him or having sex with him, depending on your perspective on this, apparently. So it's a pederasty relationship. It's in modern terms, it's concerning, right? It's not what we understand as a consenting relationship at all. But the further point about it is that if you look at things like NAMBLA, they mention Hadrian and Antinous twice in their blur, like on their website. Who
are they? NAMBLA?
Yeah, they're the North American Man-Boy Lovers Association. And so they mention this on the website. It's also referenced quite a few times in a book called Boy Lovers, which was written by a man from the Netherlands who went to prison himself for child molestation. So it has a connotation of people who are bad and do bad things use this story to signal to each other and to justify their own actions. So when women are looking at this, it's not about Artie's personality or even the assumption that Artie is bad. This is a sign of potentially something bad. We need to talk about it, especially if it's going to be associated with the LGBT Alliance.
Okay. I'm way out of my depth here. Yeah? Yeah?
Stella, I'm not attacking you, but even using the term gay couple to describe a pedophilic relationship as a gay person, that's wildly offensive to me.
Excuse me, can I answer that? Sorry, I have to answer that immediately. I said very clearly, sorry, I have to answer that. I said very clearly, I have no idea who they are. Yes. I didn't even pronounce their names correctly. So to say it's wildly offensive to me, because I said quite clearly I didn't know who they were. I am now being educated right now as we speak.
Yes, I'm
so to say it's wildly offensive is really, really an inappropriate contribution to make.
Because that's what he did. In his response, he said they're a gay couple. And so if people know, you didn't know, but if you know, I would think it's also to gay men to equate that to be the same as their sexuality, right?
Yeah.
Right, okay.
So
he said that. I don't know anything about that because I have no idea. I do know I've always found that whole Oscar Wilde thing shocking because Oscar Wilde has extensive Rent Boy and all that sort of really, it looked really way out. And I grew up with that in the 80s and 90s and I was like, this is really a weird take on a witty man. So I've no idea. And I do feel a little bit uncomfortable because this feels like really murky territory because there's an implication underlying this last 5 minutes, which I'm feeling really dodgy about, that on some level, because Artie, who's not here, has somebody in their biog that he's implicated. And I just think, wow, we are going into really dangerous, really inappropriate territory. I really don't think this is right.
The thing about it is it's not, you have to address the thing. Not you necessarily, all of us have to address the thing. It doesn't have to be about his character. We can't look at something that has an implication to it as an action by itself, not him doing it, but the thing, and then say, well, we like him and we can't think these thoughts and it's, you address the thing. He should address the thing.
Yeah, you're right. So you're right.
It's very it can't be about him as a person, because I honestly believe that if any one of us did the set of things that have been circulating, it would be fair to say, hold on a minute, what's going on? You know, it's not about the individual. It can't be about, I mean, it's being made about the individual, but it's really about all of us holding a line. And I think it's a very reasonable line to say to someone, hey, do you know that these people who call themselves modern boy lovers use that story as a reference and to signal to each other, and you've got it out in front of your bio as a...
And does he know? Has it been told?
He has been told.
I didn't even know. I'd never even heard of them. He has been told.
He decries NAMBLAs. He talks about them. He has researched them. So to me, it's pretty unbelievable that he's unaware of this. Like, they used to hand out pamphlets in the 60s and 70s with this reference on it, and it's on their website. Like, it's very well known, and like, if he lists it as an interest, it's obviously quite significant to him, right? It's not like he read a book about it once and that's it. It's an interest to him. So he's aware of the historical context.
Yeah.
So to me, it just shows kind of a lack of care for how his actions affect LGBT Alliance Canada, that he just doesn't care how it affects them. And to me, that's pretty inexcusable.
To me, there are leaps of logic there, because I don't know what he's aware of. And I think it's very unlikely, if he's openly criticised, this idea that he's having a major cloak and dagger kind of scenario where he's pretending to be A, but he's actually B, and this is a huge investigative kind of scenario that's kind of playing out as we speak. I just think this is really inappropriate, deeply, profoundly, to the point that I'm thinking I might be part of something here that's really shoddy. Like, I think this is really... What is the implication? I just want to ask you, if you don't mind, are you saying that he's a secret paedophile who's signalling to people with his biog this Antonius and Hadrian kind of subtle hint?
Well, I'm definitely
this is
not
how they're
saying
going
that.
to find him.
I'm personally saying...
What are you saying then? Please be very clear about what you're saying here.
I will be very clear about what I'm saying. I'm saying that if someone does something that is also done by very bad people, whether or not they are a good or bad person, it is completely fair to address it to them, expect them to respond decently, and expect the wider community to want to address it too.
He's left Twitter because he's absolutely too distressed. He doesn't know any of this.
No, he knows all of this. He's well aware of all of this, as is...
He responded in an email about it.
Yes, he's responded in an email. He hasn't addressed it. But the thing on Twitter that's now happening, where women who are saying, hey, this is a thing, this should be addressed, and they're being accused of all these horrible things, is really wrong. Even this implication that, it's all too sinister and we can't talk about it is wrong. Because when you hide stuff like this away, not only do you not deal with it, if it is a thing, and you also don't protect the person who is being asked to address it. Because all the time people say, we can't talk about this, we can't address it, you're just mean, evil ladies, or whatever it is that people are saying, that person remains under a shadow. If people took this seriously and addressed it, it could be done in about a day, because that's how you deal with stuff, right? You show it the light, you talk to everyone involved. That's all you have to do. All of these sort of insinuations that we're like, I don't know, a purity spiral or whatever, like all this stuff that's going around is very wrong, I think. I mean, one of the people who told me that I was showing moral purity and obsessiveness about this was the head of the Prostasia Foundation. That does not fill me with confidence that is the correct response to this.
What has that got to do with anything? I just really do think that if you're going to accuse somebody of something as massive, life-changing, life-ruining as this, yeah, you can. I won't, because my God, that's not something that will come out of my mouth until I was really sure of what I was talking about. I haven't seen these emails that you've apparently seen. I haven't seen anything that you're talking about here. And I think this is I'm really disappointed with the way this has gone. I thought we were going to discuss feminist issues, children's issues, safeguarding versus finding an understanding of autogynephilia. And then in comes from nowhere this kind of the fact that he's got, for in my eyes, the equivalent of Oscar Wilde in his biog, it's disintegrated into a very, very tenuous but life-ruining accusation. Like, it's wow! He's got somebody in his biog from Rome. And you
wow.
Roman Empire days. And you think that this is appropriate. Like, if you are serious about this, which I would hope you would be, this should be serious emails, serious gathering of facts, a serious kind of, not coming on to a chat here about this. This is so inappropriate. It's actually making me breathless here.
Well, I'm very surprised that you are unaware of this, as this has been being discussed.
I'm completely unaware.
And I'm
completely unaware.
I imagined when you wanted to speak to me to help calm the temperature of this discussion, you wanted to talk about some of these things and talk about how everyone on all sides has got very hostile, and we would de-escalate that in some way or try. But everything you're saying to me is.
I had no knowledge that there was an implicit accusation.
No, I have not made an implicit accusation. I have tried very carefully and clearly to explain why some women are concerned, right? Myself included, and why I think it should be addressed. That isn't an accusation. I'm not coming on here and saying, oh, he's this, oh, he's that, oh, he's the other. I'm very carefully trying not to do that. So I don't know how you're hearing all these things that you're then responding to with sort of... I feel like it's very bad faith. I know you don't mean to be, but I feel like it's bad faith. And I've had a lot of...
Can you see where I'm coming from? I had no idea about this.
I understand that you don't know some of this, and it's also a very heavy topic, and it's very serious, but I don't think that it's ever going to calm down if we can't talk about it.
Could you articulate, I'm willing to go with you here, I'm willing to go in good faith. Could you articulate the kind of, the theory here?
Well, the theory has mainly been that women have noticed these things. They've highlighted these things in more or less blunt ways, and people have responded how your instinct responses with the idea that it can only be wickedness that is making women bring it up, which concerns me for a lot of reasons. First of all...
I don't think it can only be wickedness. It's like you just don't say those without a serious grounding. Society works on the fact that you don't say things like that unless you've got a serious case to make, because it ruins lives and it's too devastating. So because it's such a serious accusation, it can't be along the lines of the other accusations, which is what I thought I was here to talk about, which is the AGP kind of whether it's innate or not. Like this has gone into such a much more life-ruining, life-changing, devastating kind of accusation that it's not appropriate. We've accepted in society that that's not an appropriate topic of conversation unless there's incredibly serious case to be made.
First of all,
that's nothing to do with women.
I haven't made the accusations you think I'm making, which I think is a listening error that a lot of people are making. But it has to be...
Could I be clear? Then what is it you're saying? If you're not saying what I think you're saying, could you please help me out?
That if someone does... Okay, if two people do a behaviour and one is a bad person and one is a good person and the behaviour is the same, and you know that the bad people do it, the good person who does the behaviour has a responsibility, when you point this out, to address it, to talk about it, to say, no, it's not like that at all, because X, it's very...
And I'm missing who's there, so I get you. So who should have done what?
Like...
Kind of, just clear it up. Who should have done what? Like,
the people who have the ability, people. The LGBT Alliance should have addressed this as a matter of urgency because of how serious you say it is, and because of how concerned people are. Graham Linehan should have bloody addressed it because it is so urgent, and also Artie should have addressed it. I understand his distress, I understand it's horrible getting rubbish online. It's absolutely skin-crawling and painful. But he should also address it.
Did you say getting rubbished online?
Yes. You know, like having people say things about you, and I said rubbish. Having people say things about you, having people... It's really painful, right? To go online and see people slagging you off and you think it's not true and it's not fair. It's horrible. But something of this importance, because he's not just a person, he's also the representative of the LGBT Alliance Canada. And so he has a responsibility. Yeah. And so it's not about, you know, how... It's not just about him. It's about the people in Canada who have no representation almost, who have such a tough time over there. It's almost going to be made illegal, I think, to be gender critical in Canada. They're discussing this. That they're in real trouble. The last thing they need is the kind of scandal that the queer community keep foisting on everyone because they let people in and they don't hold anyone to any standards. We hold them to standards all the time. We point out the things they do that we think are dodgy all the time. But the second someone on our side says, this thing is dodgy too and we want it addressed, suddenly it's also serious and life-ruining and terrible. Well, people are out on Twitter every day pointing out what the trans activists are doing in much more strident terms than anything that you will find me saying about Artie Morty. So where is the standard in that? Either it's okay to talk about serious things and expect serious responses, or it isn't. If it's only okay when they're on our side, that's not a principle, that's just tribalism.
Yeah, I'm not really there at all. I kind of think the most important thing to do is to be making sure that the work I do helps stop children being medicated. And that's the utmost focus. And if somebody has got an inappropriate biog on Twitter, I don't think that's urgent, because I think there's a bad faith understanding. I don't know, because I've no kind of access to truth here, but I think it feels like a bad faith understanding because it is being made in the wind of a wave of unpopularity against Artie Morty. I didn't hear of any of this until today, and I didn't hear of any of this when everybody was talking about the drunken tweet and stuff like this. So this has come from nowhere to me, and I'm like, okay, you're not accusing, but you're kind of saying this should be discussed, and I'm like, well, it definitely shouldn't be discussed with me. Well, it's definitely way out of my place, because I have no idea.
There is a slight misunderstanding there, because from our conversation I imagined that we were going to talk about the whole scope of and try and sort of...
Okay, so what do you think should have happened? Imagine, okay, Artie has left Twitter, so he's not on Twitter now, so what do you think should have happened then?
Well, I think now we're left with a situation where Artie isn't here, but everyone is very angry with each other. Everyone feels quite misunderstood. Everyone feels like their motives are being impugned. And we now have to clear up that mess. And part of clearing up that mess is understanding that people coming from different perspectives are not necessarily doing a particular horrible thing. I don't think you're being horrible. You're not seeing the relevance of this, but I know I'm not being horrible by being concerned. And so there has to be room for that if we're going to clear it up.
I am, but I'll be very honest, I do think anybody who is bringing up a paedophile scenario in this context, I think that's inappropriate. And I want to say deeply inappropriate, because it's not strong enough and it shouldn't be said publicly until it is. Yeah.
Okay. Queer activists in Canada are taken at their word in all mainstream media. They are talking about this. He is the representative of LGBT Alliance Canada, and queer activists in Canada are talking about this, and journalists take them very seriously in Canada. It's not just about this poor guy. I don't think people understand what a huge effect this can have on the potentiality of any kind of GC LGBT movement in Canada. It's not about this one guy. He represents people, and he is responsible for how he represents them. it's very strange to me that, you know, he talks on his podcast that he doesn't want, that, you know, the gay movement needs to distance itself from THAY, from NAMBLA, from pedophiles, all of this stuff. Okay, good. Then people point out, oh, this is in your bio, you've tweeted this and that.
When did they point that out? How did I miss that? When did they point that out?
It's very strange.
But he has been on Twitter for 2 weeks.
The hashtag. Yeah.
Well, I haven't. But, do you believe me?
Yeah, I believe you. But I'm just saying,
but he hasn't been on Twitter, so how would he have
responded? No, people emailed him and he responded to the emails. So he knows. And it's very strange to me that as the head of LGBT Alliance Canada, when people are saying, this looks really bad for LGBT Alliance Canada, as a Canadian, I'm concerned about this, and he takes no action at all.
Do you know what's really upsetting to me is that, like, children are being trans today, and they're getting operations today, and they're getting operations tomorrow, and that we have a real proper fight in our hands, a really urgent one right now, today, physical one, a physical one.
Yes, I totally agree with you.
And I think we really need to make sure that
beyond repudiation, so that when they go to fight this, people can't say, oh, everything they're saying is disreputable.
No, nobody needs to be beyond repudiation. No, they don't. Nobody does. What we need to do is make sure
seriously as an alternative to these other groups that don't take safeguarding seriously. If they
can you tell me who is beyond repudiation? Because in my world, nobody is beyond repudiation. Nobody.
What I meant was that if these people are going to interface with the government on behalf of GC LGBT Canadians, how are they supposed to do that if the moment you Google them, this is what you find?
This is not what you find. What you find is somebody... No, excuse me, this is not what you find. What you find is somebody who's absolutely said that the gay movement needs to distance themselves from all these organisations like NAMBLA and PI that you've just said. He said it very clearly. That's what they'll find. If you did...
So then why does he have a NAMBLA dog whistle in his bio?
It's not a NAMBLA dog whistle, and that's a really inappropriate...
Dog whistle, literally.
I don't buy into this concept of dog whistles. I think it's the equivalent of Oscar Wilde in his biog. I'd say I don't believe you. I don't agree with you that it's a NAMBLA dog whistle. It might be also a NAMBLA dog whistle, but I don't believe it's always a NAMBLA dog whistle when you mention this Roman couple. And so you need to be very careful about what you're saying. Because people do not need to be beyond repudiation. Nobody needs to be beyond repudiation.
To speak to LGBT Alliance Canada. And this is his bio. Do you think that makes LGBT Alliance Canada look respectable? Look like somebody to be trusted?
I don't think it's relevant at all. I think his work is what matters. And I think
you think that the liberal queer media in Canada is going to take the same perspective as you?
I don't think they're going to talk to him in the next year, no matter what. Because why? Because I've been in massive work around the Canadian issue and children being trans. I've done a huge amount of work, a huge amount of effort, a massive amount of interaction with the Canadian media and the Canadian government. There is not a chance in hell that they're going to be speaking to Artie Morty about any of this. And so this idea that he has to be beyond repudiation when clearly he's left Twitter, when clearly there's an awful lot going on in his life, and one thing has been picked up upon and ran with to an extraordinary extent, while in the meantime, huge issues aren't being discussed because we're rambling on about this for ages and ages and ages. And I don't agree that it's a NAMBLA dog whistle. I think you should frankly take it back. I think you've said something really abhorrent about somebody, and I think it's a really inappropriate thing to say. And when you live in a civilized society, you learn not to fling accusations out. If you've got a serious accusation, by God, you have your homework done, because you don't do that if you're civilized, because it's not decent.
I'm not accusing him of being any one specific thing. I'm accusing him of not taking his responsibility as a representative seriously.
And I'm accusing you as not taking your responsibility as a human seriously, because you don't say things like that lightly.
I'm not saying it lightly. I'm very serious about this. I'm a victim of grooming. To me, there's no gray area in this issue. Either you're completely against it and you would never say anything to justify it, or like his email response.
Or you made a mistake and you put a Roman couple on your bio because you think it looks cool. Yeah? What about that thought? What about if that's the concept? What if that is what has happened?
Yeah, but that's what I said before. Yeah. If that's what happened, and then all these people are saying, oh, look, you're the head of LGBT Alliance Canada, and this is associated with NAMBLA, so maybe that looks bad. What possible reason could there be for him to not take it down? Because he's incapable?
I'll tell you what, because he's absolutely not listening or reading, or can barely read half of the points, that there's probably many emails coming through that he's, like I completely discarded that point when somebody said it. They said something about Antonius, and I was like, what the hell is this about? This is nuts. And I read on for more kind of coherent points that actually could really need to be thought about, which is AGP and how do we deal with this, and what should we do about the fact that there's AGP boys, and they seem to be kind of influenced by porn, and are they ROGD boys, and what should we do with this fact, because we're used to talking about AGP middle-aged male, and now we're suddenly talking about AGP teenagers, and how are we supposed to navigate this, and how should we handle this as a movement? This is what we should be talking about, not these kind of outlandish, inappropriate, deeply tenuous jumps because of a name of a Roman Empire couple who were gay. Like, it's just inappropriate.
With that response, how exactly is there any chance of calming down the situation? With that kind of emotive, judgmental, personally attacking response, where exactly do women who have concerns go? How can they talk it through? How can they stop having concerns? Because all they are getting is this wall of rage and impugning their character and telling them that they are wrong and they should shut up. That's all that is. That's all you're saying. All of the things you're saying.
No, I'm not. I'm saying let's talk about AGP. Let's talk about children. Let's talk about how we deal with AGP.
Let her speak.
Whether we should be fixated on the fact that it's a compulsion, whether, there's a huge amount to talk about. But this coming in from kind of left field is just...
It's not left field. Most of the people listening to this are aware that this has been going around Twitter. I'm very sorry you didn't realise. You and I should have spoken on the phone earlier and gone through what would come up so that you would be aware, because I can understand that it's overwhelming to have it suddenly appear. But this whole response from you is what women have been getting. And
that's because we have a system in society that there's certain things you don't say.
But what you're saying...
And you don't say them not because you're a woman, not because you're being silenced, but because the implication of it is so heavy that we can't live in a society that you say this unless you've got a very, very strong case. That's how we operate in society. You can't break those sacred kind of implicit rules that make us operate well together. And if you do, people are going to react very strongly, because everything breaks down if people can throw around life-ruining accusations with impunity. Everything breaks.
What's the life-ruining accusation? What do you hear us say?
That he has a NAMBLA dog whistle in his Twitter bio. Life-changing, life-ruining, devastating.
I mean, I didn't say that, but you had already said it was life-ruining accusation. So the fact that I have...
Well, it was said here. Sorry if I'm mixing up the voices. I don't know who said it, but definitely it got said.
But you see, because you are unaware of what's been happening, there is also other things that have led people not to just dismiss the Antinous thing. But I really hesitate to bring them up, because this does not feel like a good environment to discuss it.
No. Let's move it on. Let's just move it on, because let's just move that bit on. Yeah. And just talk about other issues. Because honestly, it's not right.
Can I say one thing before we move on? It's not...
I hope you've really thought about what you're going to say, but yeah.
I think that gay people have a right to decide who they want to be their representatives. And I think it's a little bit strange that all of these straight women have decided on behalf of gay Canadians that this is not an issue for us. That's all I have to say.
Okay. The other thing that I would like to say is that if you are unaware of so many of the facts of what is happening, you should take it a little bit more seriously when you go on Twitter and accuse women of being bullies, because we're getting a lot of that, and it's not right. It's not true in a lot of cases. And so perhaps if we don't all know what's going on, We shouldn't be branding other people these quite also unpleasant things, right?
Yeah, but I didn't brandish women as being bullies. I brandished people
as bullying. In the context,
there is a difference, and this was definitely not towards women.
Of course, there's a difference, but in the context of this conversation, that really just reads like the women who are bringing up concerns are bullies, and so it just like increases the temperature even more. I mean, the number of women I've talked to this week who have felt like they are out on a limb and quite distressed by all of this is quite high. The number of people I've spoken to who are like, literally, I've come from meetings all day and they're so devastated, and their child might be going for surgery on Monday, and they're just saying they're devastated that we as a movement are distracting ourselves from the real issues, the real huge problem that we have ahead of ourselves. That there's 17-year-olds, there's 18-year-olds getting mastectomies. There's really life-changing, awful things happening this week to people I know, and the families involved are devastated that we're being distracted, we're fighting each other. It's the vanity of small differences. It's different kind of, let's say, is it women or should it be children? Should we be worried about free speech? And that it's so theoretical. And yes, it's very hurtful. It's very hurtful for some people to say, let's say, for example, that I said there was bullying. I stand by the fact there was bullying, and I stand by it even more now, because in my world, I don't live in a world where people can be accused of really huge things without a serious case, and it's not good enough to say there's something in your bio. It's not a strong enough. It's just not a strong enough argument. I'm sorry, I've come back to it, and I'll move it away. Sorry, but I just know that there's such devastation of, oh my God, I can't believe people are talking about this, that, and the other. When actually we need to be coming together as a movement. There's really awful things happening on Monday and on Tuesday this week. Well, I think the complete dramatization of what I have said and what the Liberation have said is part of that problem. I also think there are so many other things that we would have discussed, but I don't think we can. I think this is too febrile, and I don't think it's going to be productive if we go into all of it. But it is a shame. So what would you like to talk about?
Okay, yeah. What were the things that were kind of, I suppose I had said that there was, I think the thing that I was kind of thinking that was really interesting was, how should we manage the issue of AGPs in society? Where should they go? How should we manage them? This is the thing that I'd really love to get out of this conversation. How should that be managed in society? How should I, how should you, how should anybody? Because there's different kind of, I suppose, needs. And I suppose my need is not only to understand, but also I really truly believe that the only way that we're going to get out of this whole huge, massive identity, ideology mess is with public information. I don't think that it's going to work any other way. And so we have to have a public information campaign around, I believe, that if you trans children, that it goes very badly wrong. I also think that we need to get out in the world. There's a concept called gender identity, and there's also a developmental model. And they're two kind of opposing sides. And I believe in the developmental model. And I think, therefore, all child transition falls on that model. And I think it's really important that we let the public know about these concepts, because they don't, because I meet them all the time. And these are parents of kids. They don't know that there's two. They don't know that there's two beliefs. They don't know that there's two different theories. And then another thing that I really think we need to know, and I was only telling the Irish minister a few days ago about this concept, that there's a thing called autogynephilia. And this is, as you all know, the erotic fixation, and to be a woman. And this shapes a huge amount of the issues around, let's say, trans women in jails, and trans women in refuges, and trans women in all sorts of places that they shouldn't be. It shapes the entire breastfeeding, the birthing movement. It's shaping a huge amount of parts of society. So it's really, really problematic in the world. So we've got this huge problem. Now, how do we deal with this? How do we deal with those people? I know lots of people who are listening will be saying, well, it's not my problem, so I don't deal with it. And I'm like, yeah, but I think it's society's problem, so we have to. So I don't know how we should deal with this fact that people can develop this fixation. What do we do with them when they develop it? I'm interested to know what you think.
Well, I don't really know what we do, except that if everyone knows about it and understands it, then we don't say that they're women. We don't open up women's spaces, and we don't... I mean, it's not like there's...
And how do we get everybody to know it and understand it?
It's very hard because people don't want to talk about it, and it's almost taboo, and people don't believe in it. So I think we all have to just talk about it. We all have to be willing to discuss it, and we have to be willing... I mean, we do on Twitter anyway, but like it has to make it outside of Twitter, right? All of the people...
Yeah, but then when we discussed it, I think you're right. I think public information is the only way forward. I actually don't think there is another way, and I wish there was. But I think it has to be a public awareness campaign. But when we put it on the podcast, when we interviewed Debbie, there was an outcry that we shouldn't be given a platform. And I thought, but we have to let people know that this condition exists. That I can point to the Irish minister and say, listen to this podcast. That's what I'm talking about.
It's very important to let people know. It's also very important to ask challenging questions of people with it, perhaps. And
yeah, I think I missed a few.
It's easy to do in conversations to miss something. Yes.
I've no doubt I'm missing so many things in this. And my apologies, honestly, it's not lack of effort. But
it's got a bit intense in this one, you know. I didn't anticipate that. I thought we were the calmest.
I was. I just, like you said, I did get overwhelmed. I was like, what is the conversation going? Oh my God. It came from nowhere, but we've left it. But I did get totally overwhelmed.
Yes,
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. So come on. So keep going. I'm very interested where we go here.
Well,
so you know what I mean. I thought public awareness. That's the only way we can go. Podcast. Me and Sasha spend hours over that podcast. Hours for free. Hours every week, and we're booked up to our eyeballs. But we actually think, no, we've got to do this because we've got to get the information out there. We're trying to delve into we literally did an entire podcast, an entire episode on suicide. Not because we thought people wanted to listen to suicide, but because it's essential that we have an episode on suicide.
Yes, of course it is. It's important that you talk about all kinds of issues.
Yeah.
Do you talk about things like Lawrence's work and all the literature on this, or do you stick to personal stories?
No, what we do is we sometimes interview people, and we've got a list of pioneers that we're going to interview in the next coming few weeks. And the idea with that will be, talk to the Ken Zuckers, talk to the different Ray Blanchard types, that we can kind of go, okay, what was their theory? What did they think? They've been in the world for 30 years. They've been in the world for 40 years. There's not many of them. And they presumably have their own theories about what's going on. And I'm not saying I actually buy it, because I honestly think between the 1990s and the 2010s, I think all the mistakes were made. And I look at other movements, just to get myself completely mauled tonight, like the anti-vax movement and things like that. And I think they didn't give away the keys, but something happened between the 1990s and the 2010s with the gender movement, that the keys were given away to the activists. Now, I'm not saying anything about vaccinations. I'm just using it as an example. Do you follow me? That I think huge mistakes were made by the actual people that we're going to be interviewing. And so there's a fine line, because I've no interest in inviting somebody on who I think really knows their stuff, but who I disagree with, just like you do with me. You're being very nice, but you do think I'm wrong about a few things. I'll be like that with them, if you follow me.
Yes, of course.
And so, I have a natural friendliness, and I have a natural kind of, as you've noticed, energy. And so I'll be like, hi, how's it going? And I'll be, you know what I mean? And I looked back when I listened to, let's say, the interview with Debbie and all that, I probably shouldn't have started the interview laughing. I should have had more sensitivity. I should have known. Of course I should have known. But at the same time, I'm human, man. I'm whacking out these podcasts, and we're really, really, really genuinely in good faith trying to get a deep understanding of gender. We're trying so hard. And we're really contributing.
I've added a few people as speakers. So let's just go in order that I added them. First, Isle of Lesbos, you can comment, then Julia Mason, then adult human female.
Thank you. I think it's really good that we're just trying to hash this out. For me, I want to make a clear distinction of AGP and pedophilia are not sexual orientations, but they're paraphilias. And part of the creep that happens and that I observe a lot in the LGBT community is the trying to reframe it as a sexual orientation, just like they're trying to also do with zoo files. And so I think there has to be a clear distinction of what is a paraphilia, which I do believe is developmentally in the psyche. I think we also need to address fixation, OCD, obsession, rumination, and there are behaviors which are sort of like OCD clusters that feed into these paraphilias. And I'm speaking from someone who worked with male sex offenders in a lockdown prison. So I've dealt with a lot of this in a therapeutic setting. I've also worked with survivors of sexual abuse. So I've been on both sides of it. But the reframing of this as a sexual orientation is what's concerning me. The second part about the AGP and what we're seeing with young males, I don't believe it's in the same category when we speak about someone of Debbie Hayton that is a late life transitioner, and their cluster of paraphilias and the experience that Debbie experienced is not what these kids are. These kids are being grabbed and groomed by quote unquote egg hatchers on Reddit, on these Discord servers, through sissy porn and other things. And these are vulnerable children who are guys who are lonely, who are nerdy, who might have a high IQ, but they have difficulty making connections and relationships with other human beings, and especially girls. And when they come of a sexual age, they're being preyed on. Now, who might be preying on them are people that fall under these categories of late life AGPers and or pedophiles. Now, this is where the overlay is. And I just want to say, if we're standing up for children and trying to stop kids from transitioning, which is the number one thing on my list, I think we do have to address the older men driving this and their own sexual paraphilias and fascinations that make these children vulnerable to them. And so somehow it all intertwines. And me being an old school lesbian, I've had to fight against NAMBLA and PI trying to attach their letter to us for eons and eons. So yes, red flags will come up for me that heterosexual people who have not been in the community for 25 plus years do not see coming. And that will always be a concern. And I will fight back on that front as well. So this is not, quote unquote, about Artie so much. It's about the LGBT community and how these other people with bad intentions attempt to co-opt our movement and add their spin on it. And I think that some of us just want to address that. As far as the Cantor aspect of it, yes, Cantor does think that the LGBT should add P, and I resist that. And I think that Paul Cantor will say good things about children and not transitioning and stuff like that. But whenever something comes up about pedophilia being a sexuality, I'm going to speak up and I'm going to shoot that down. Now, I do look forward to anything that you do with Ken Zucker, because Ken Zucker actually worked with children who transitioned. And I think we focus so much on these therapists who have worked with late life male transitioners, that it's a whole different cohort than what we're seeing today. So thanks for holding this space.
Thank you.
And I appreciate it.
Could I comment on that? Thank you very much. I thought they were really, really interesting points, and I really welcomed them. And the paraphilia sexual orientation was where I thought I was going to be speaking tonight. I do want to point out, I do have a meeting, and it is, by the way, just so people know, it's a meeting of this cause at 6:00, and I will want a cup of tea beforehand, so I will be trying to kind of get off at about 8 minutes to or something like that. Cup of tea and put a white towel over my head for 3 minutes. But I do think those points were fascinating, and I'd love, maybe we do it another day, because it did get febrile and it got distracted, in fairness, as a talk, and I'd love to hear the other people who are going to talk, so I'll just shut up in a second. But I do think that paraphilia sexual orientation is a fascinating point, really, really important. Yes, shoot us down, shoot everybody down. I want to talk to everybody. I think it's a really under-researched field. I do think it's paraphilia. I think it's a compulsion. I do think what Debbie Hayton said, that this is male sexuality as opposed to AGP, was a fascinating point that has stayed with me, and I've really absorbed it, and I've followed that point a lot in the last few weeks, because I think this is about male sexuality that got exposed with autogynephilia in its purest form, and it's, well, not purest, impurest, but you know what I mean, in the most revealing form. But anyway, let the other people speak, because I am rambling.
Okay, so there's a lot of people who want to speak, so I think the way we should do this is
I'd like to say something.
Yeah, add people as speakers.
Just
so Julia, it's your turn now, and then
since Artie isn't here, and people are very upset that he has Hadrian and Antinous, and that really does seem to be like the linchpin of most of the argument. I think my understanding is that Artie ran away from home and became homeless because he was gay and misunderstood.
Yeah.
And that this was, that he had a really rough start to the whole thing. And I would imagine that Hadrian and Antinous were, some of the first sort of famous, the idea that a Roman emperor was gay and made all these temples and statues of his lover must have been, really fortifying for a young gay man who's in a really rough place. And so this is something, I'm guessing, that goes back for him. And I just want to read what he wrote, because Stella, this did go on, and so people said you shouldn't have that in your bio. So Artie said, Hadrian and Antinous are among the most famous figures in ancient history. Everyone knows of Hadrian from his wall, and Antinous is widely considered the most important sculptural figure of the Roman era, with sculptures of him prominently on display everywhere from the British Museum to the Vatican. For 2 centuries, Antinous was worshipped as a god in the Roman world, and he was a far more popular deity than even Jesus was at the time. An openly gay god who was bigger than Jesus is, to me, one of the most fascinating things that has ever happened. Hadrian and Antinous' openly gay relationship is one of the most famous homosexual couples in all of history, figuring in arts of all kinds, including a recent opera composed by Rufus Wainwright for the Canadian Opera. Opera is one of my primary interests. This is hardly pedophile company. It's hardly pedophile material. I have a stellar track record criticizing NAMBLA and Pi. I've very publicly locked horns with Peter Tatchell over his past association with Pi and its members, and there are countless examples of me calling out those groups on YouTube. It's not an exaggeration to say I've probably said more to criticize pedophiles trying to infiltrate gay rights activism than anyone else involved in the gender critical movement. For an example, try my interview with Benjamin Boyce. Attempts to smear my character based on my entirely mainstream cultural interests are nothing new. I've had people attack me for liking Tim Curry of Rocky Horror fame, which some people find unacceptable. Did you not notice I listed Wagner in my Winterest too? And then he goes on about that. So I think that at this point, people are like, that's a pedophile thing. And he's like, no, this is a mainstream gay couple. And obviously you can look at it very different ways. But the idea that, like, I don't know, I feel that if this is something that, you know, gave him strength, I can understand why he's being stubborn about this. Because people get their back up and then they get stubborn. And it just seems really sad that we have an argument that's raging for weeks because one group of people is like, that's a NAMBLA dog whistle. And another group of people go, that's a Roman couple from hundreds of years ago. And this is what's breaking everything down. I'm sad about it.
Oh, thanks, Julia. That was I do want to. I have to go in a minute. I just want to say thank you, Julia. I think I'm really, really glad you read all of that out, because I think it's incredibly important that if somebody's spoken about in absentia, that if we can get the person's response in, I think it's incredibly important that it's submitted. And I'm so glad, Julia, that you made that point, you got it, and you read it out, because I think it's key, frankly.
Yeah, I'd like to.
If anybody's interested, I posted the link. I posted the link in the top. Yeah, so adult, human, female, it's your turn, and then I'm going to pick the next person.
I'm really going to have to go in about 2 minutes.
Yeah, so I don't think we should change the subject about this. I also think that we all do have a responsibility, like before we take a side, to look at all the information and investigate it. So there's a few arguments that are coming up. First of all, just to put in context, we're living in a society where pedophilia is becoming absolutely normalized in a lot of ways. That looks a lot of different ways. For example, changing the word pedophile to minor attracted person is just one example. Now, to point out, what the women who wrote the letter accused Artie Morty of was pedophilia apologism. And the apologism is something that is actually supporting this normalization of pedophilia.
No, I'm really sorry.
No, don't interrupt me, please. I'm not finished speaking.
No, I am, because this is...
No, I'm going to finish speaking before... So anyways, pedophilia apologism is something that is supporting the normalization of pedophilia being made normal. It's very common, and Stella actually pointed this out with AGP. It's very common in porn now for children to be depicted in drawn porn. So, like, that's becoming normal too, and people are...
Could I hear that person who wanted to speak?
Please, I want to finish what I have to say. I've been waiting for like an hour and 15 minutes. So, like, what the women accused him of was pedophilia apologism. They did not accuse him of being a pedophile. A 13-year-old boy and a 48-year-old man a 13-year-old boy cannot consent to that sex. Changing the definition of that from this is a pedophilic relationship to, oh, now this is an openly gay couple, that's part of this bigger trend. It's a problem. It's a big problem. And like Isle of Lesbos said, James Cantor is this person who is now saying that this is a sexuality. That's like part of normalizing this. So, like, we need to take concrete action and not just make it about Artie as a person.
May I say something? I'm sorry that emotions are obviously running really, really high. And I want to address this thing about him being a pedophile apologist. If we look at art, I graduated from the Royal College of Art. And if we look at the painting Leda and the Swan, it was used as reference for the album artwork of Bjork. Now, what are we going to do? Are we going to call everybody who have the artwork of Bjork apologist for bestiality? Because that painting is regularly referenced by people who are, I don't know what the word is, I believe it's zoophilia or something. So why are we focusing on this thing that is ancient history when it's art is regularly used as reference, and it can be extrapolated into so many different ways? I had Bjork on my bio. Am I a bestiality apologist? Of course I'm not. This is ridiculous. And also, Lorelei, you mentioned that the thing we have to do is talk about AGP. Artie talking about AGP, and he is now ostracized. So what is it that he said about AGP which is not appropriate?
Well, I haven't said that he said anything inappropriate, but I would suggest that coming on Twitter and asking women to have empathy for AGP is a very blunt tool for whatever he hopes to achieve. And that, especially when we have trans widows who have suffered so much and who know probably more about AGP than any of us, it is a better thing to have a fair conversation, but not treat women as unkind if they don't respond with the level of empathy you think is appropriate.
And I'd like to add, so like this whole Bjork thing, and also Stella said something similar about Oscar Wilde, right? So let's use this example. Oscar Wilde raped a 17-year-old boy named Robbie Ross. Now, somebody being a fan of Oscar Wilde, even putting Oscar Wilde in their Twitter bio, that is something that in essence is different from someone putting in their Twitter bio Oscar Wilde and Robbie Ross, because that's a pedophilia, that's a child rape. A child rape is different than if he had said Hadrian in his bio. But what we have here is an example of child rape, even though, yes, it was thousands of years ago. However, the fact that it was thousands of years ago is used for the moral relativism. So like just being a fan of something is totally different from saying, here's this child rape and I'm a fan of that. That is something in essence that's different from Hadrian as a person or Oscar Wilde as a person.
This is stretched beyond reality. It really is. I mean, this is paper thin. I mean, to extrapolate these things from cultural...
It's really not, though, because hold on, because he responded and he said this is an openly gay couple. But is an openly gay couple... I have a question for you, Pink. Is a 13-year-old boy and a 48-year-old man, is that something that you would characterize as a gay couple, or would you characterize it as a child rape?
I don't think I would class it as a gay couple. But honestly, again, like Stella, I don't know anything about that story, and I don't know anything about the history. I don't know anything about those characters.
Then go look it up before you speak on it. I'm sorry, but
What?
when it comes to pedophilia and pedophile apologism, we do need to take a side. We have to take a side. Like, this is what's happening to our culture. Our culture is being pedophilia.
What happened?
Everyone got muted.
Pedophilia is being normalized. We need to stick to the definition, right? So, like, we need to stick to the definition. The definition is being changed. The goalposts are being shifted. What Artie did, concretely, that constitutes as pedophile apologism, is defining a child rape as a gay couple, and that this is something to look up to. But it's not, we shouldn't romanticize this. Now, I understand there's all these other examples, people from history who did problematic things, quote unquote problematic, right? I understand people don't like cancel culture. I also do not like cancel culture, right? I don't think it's like, oh, you say one wrong thing and you get canceled. I think that's a problem too. But that's not necessarily what this is. This is about children and their safeguarding, and what is the definition of pedophilia? What is the definition of child rape? If we can't even say that child rape is child rape, what does that mean for our future?
Okay, thank you for saying that, for your comment, adult human female. So next we're going to let Mama speak, and then Sex is Real is going to speak. And if anybody wants to reply to anyone, please raise your hand and I will call on you. If we're all speaking over each other, I'm going to mute everyone again.
Hi there. I just wanted to sort of say, first of all, I have the utmost respect for everybody, for Lorelei, Stella, for Dikey, and trying to host this sort of talk. And the place that I'm coming from is my daughter identifies as a gay man. And I would have really liked to sort of put this before Stella, because we talk a lot about AGP in men specifically, because that's been the primary cohorts that are presented previously. Stella's now dealing with a lot of younger boys with AGP, but I have, looking at what my daughter is going through, identifying as a man, in a relationship with a man, that her compulsion is to be a man, and I get deeply worried. I mean, I come from a place of I'm a feminist first and foremost. She was brought up as a feminist in a very pro-feminine household. So, you know, I'm shell-shocked from what we're going through. But I also just wonder, and would really like to try and understand, how do we help our children? Because ultimately we can have these conversations, and I hope that we do, so that those that are representing are, you know, able to also be human beings and make mistakes, and that we can find the space to forgive them, because coming behind is a whole cohort of children whose minds are being radicalized. And if we don't get this right now, I'm just really concerned I'm going to lose my daughter to an ideology, and there's not going to be anyone around to help me, because we're fighting over the small stuff. So that's all I wanted to say, and I do have huge respect for you all, and this is a massively tough subject, and I'm just glad that we're trying to talk about it. Baby steps is all I can say. So that's it. Thank you.
Is it my turn? Oh my gosh.
Yep.
So
go for it.
I don't know about other people, but I know for myself, the linchpin on Artie being a pedo apologist, or whatever, however you want to characterize it, was not the like reference in his bio or anything like that. Like, I wouldn't know about any like NAMBLA dog whistles or anything. It was his response to a man getting arrested for seeking sex with a 13-year-old. He literally says, I don't understand if they send you pictures in which you look over 20, talks to you about things that someone over 20 could understand, how is it possible to be arrested? And the reply is, because she told him she was 13. And and if you talk about like grooming and like young girls who are preyed upon by men who have pedophilia or whatever, like, they are going to look older. They're going to sound mature-ish because, you know, like, they've been groomed into knowing these things that they probably shouldn't, or they should definitely not have known about. And if you are looking for somebody who's young and you're preying on them, you're only going to see the things that make them look older as things that are reasons for them to be older. You're looking with your penis for, like, you're not actually going to be going, oh, well, like if she says she's 13, you should leave. And Artie is literally like saying, well, I don't understand, like, how can that happen? And then he even further says, and I'm looking at the screenshots right now. The vast overabundance of evidence that she was an adult on one side versus her statement that she was 13 on the other, and at best a wisp of a shadow of a possibility that it might be true. That's what we're weighing here. Like, that is a direct quote. That is the linchpin for me. He's literally saying her word wasn't good enough, that she was 13. That's why I think he is a pedo apologist and shouldn't be on the LGBA, whatever. He shouldn't be a speaker for us.
And the her in that case was an undercover cop. Just to for the listeners, it was a discussion of a court case, and there was no actual child in the situation. It was an undercover cop, and apparently sharing pictures of not a child.
I saw the picture of the person, and she did look to be very young. She looked to be underage. And the way she spoke in the court transcripts, the spelling was appalling and she spoke like a child. But, you know, that's just added details of the case. I mean, he definitely belonged in jail, that man. He should be in prison, but
I just want to point out that it was a discussion of a court case. That's
yes,
all.
Of course. Thank you. And it was from a New York Times article, right?
Yeah. Thank you both for your comments. Okay, so now we're going to let Pippi speak, and then I'm going to add a few more speakers.
I've had to wait so long, and there's been so many issues that I wanted to speak on, and especially while Stella was here. But I think it became really apparent very quickly that I would not be able to finish my sentences if I were to say what I wanted to say to Stella. And I worry that I will be interrupted. So I just want to let you know that what I do have to say, if you interrupt me, I'll lose my train of thought. So please hold your thoughts for afterwards. I would appreciate it. I'm a trans widow. I came to this movement in about 2015, 2016. When Trump got elected, I checked out and I mentally hung out on Turf Island. And I learned a lot. And I learned about basically my trauma, what had happened to me. So while I was active, I was learning about the intimate narcissistic abuse that had happened to me. And I've learned a lot since then. And I've even had to unlearn some of it because we all see the horror show every day. And so I have an up-close view of my trauma, and I'm interacting with people who are just like my abuser. And I'm also surrounded by people that have the same paraphilias as my abuser. And that's been the case since I've been in this movement. And, you know, I married a cross-dresser knowingly because I grew up in a very sexually liberated environment, and it wasn't that big of a deal. But also, you know, a woman of this era, I've had to deal with a lot of men's fetishes, and this wasn't the worst of them. I wasn't into it, but it wasn't the worst, and you know how many there are. So he was a really sweet, nice guy. So, you know, I couldn't put up with this, and it seemed like, you know, the transvestitism, that I had grown up with, and I had known many transvestites growing up and had no problem with them at all. So I went in pretty naively, and what I discovered is that it was just regular narcissistic abuse, but with a lot of extra glitter and rainbows put on top. And I think that's what we forget here is all these comorbidities is that everybody conveniently ignores about what AGP is. The autism, which I'm not an expert on autism, but that played a role. But it's the type of narcissism, I don't know the proper name for it, but that's what it is. This is narcissistic abuse. And this is a paraphilia that is normalized. And when you are a trans widow and you decide not to sign on board for this paraphilia, you become scorned. You become the villain in your own families. You become the intolerant bad guy. This transcends, this goes outward in a fractal. This goes to your family. This goes to all of your friends and acquaintances. This goes to your political allies. This goes outward. If you look for a job in any sort of industry that people may know of this industry, it limits where you can go. For me, because the industries that I worked in, I would definitely not be able to be active under my own name. I cleaned houses. One, because I was under deep PTSD trauma from my experience, but also I wouldn't be able to talk about it under my own name, so I cleaned houses. You won't find trans widows talking about, you won't find us out with YouTube channels, and, driving likes and stuff, because this isn't the sort of thing that can be commodified for, a fun YouTube channel. It's really dark and nobody wants to fucking hear it because it doesn't line up with their own theories. Nobody wants to ask the motherfucking experts about AGP. Nobody wants to hear from us. We'll tell you all about it. Thing is, none of you want to fucking hear it. And that's fine, but quit speaking on behalf and conjecturing about what AGP is and defending it while we're standing right there looking at you. And like for Stella's interview with Debbie, my heart broke in 1,000 pieces for Debbie's wife. I have no idea what Debbie's wife is like, but I know what being a trans widow is like, and I know what it's like to try to, when you love somebody, to try to protect their ego and try to protect the image they have of themselves, and you try to be so supportive and loving, and you get to the point where you realize that there's nothing left because they've drained every last shred of you out. That's what I see. And I think nobody wants to hear that story. So I can talk about the arty stuff, but I don't want to because trans widows don't get a platform like this. So there's another side of the story to this. And that plays into where Artie was sort of begging for empathy. He was asking trans widows for empathy for AGPs. And that was another form of narcissistic abuse that plays out throughout the culture, that the entire culture is doing to us. And then Artie came in like a fucking shark and then asked the most empathetic people to AGPs, because, you know, we got dragged into this, for more of it. It was like a fucking dagger. Anyway, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. So we have 20 people who want to speak, and this is only going to work if we are very careful. So I have two options: to either start kicking out speakers so we don't have too many people, or everyone promises that they will not speak without raising their hand. So if everyone can just behave, then I can keep adding lots of speakers and there'll be a possibility to have conversations. Like Labris, double Labris with the book. I don't know what your name is. Yet another witch. Why don't you go for it?
Yeah, hi. Pippi, just to start off with, yours are the kind of voices that I absolutely want to amplify. I already follow you, but if you want to follow me back, I'm so sorry for what you've been through. Second off, going back to Artie, I think it's really, really important to be so aware of the fact that the associations between paedophilia and the homosexual community in particular, they go back years, and it's a really, really tricky subject because any association at all impacts on the whole community. And when LGB Alliance allow it in Canada, it impacts on every branch of LGB Alliance and anyone associated with. That's something that concerns me greatly. I'm not sure that Artie should be part of LGBA Canada at all. That's about it, really. Oh, and I just wanted to say as well, Lorelei, I was really, really stressed out listening to you and Stella.
Okay, thanks for sharing. Stephanie is connecting, and then next is going to be New Thought Crime.
Oh, is it my turn? Gosh, yeah, thanks for putting me on stage. I had many thoughts going back a while, but things have shifted. I think at this moment I'll use having the mic just to kind of bring your awareness, if you're not aware, to who all is in the room, because we have so many incredible people who have been listening. So we have detransitioners such as Watson and Carol. I don't know if Carol's still around, but she was. We have trans folks such as Erin. We have Tanya. She's a psychologist and author. We have parents and doctors and teachers, and we've had representatives of nonprofits. And so this whole time, my awareness has just been with all the incredible voices that could be here. There's a lot I could say on this subject right now, but I want to go ahead and pass the mic, and I'm not sure how long I'll be able to stick around. So thank you.
Okay, thanks for sharing. So next, New Thought Crime.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Okay. I wanted to talk about the RT business and the stuff in the bio. Because I think I really disagreed. I don't want to obviously talk about Stella directly because she's not here anymore, but I just really disagreed with a lot of her points. And it made me think about a lot of people who have been maybe detrans or re-identified might remember this, but obviously, like, when it comes to the trans community talking about abuse, we sometimes talk about pattern recognition, which is basically like women need to be able to recognize patterns of abuse, and in that particular context, male abuse, and name it as abuse or red flags. And that's what that reminds me of. I think it's really important that everyone is free to talk about if they're suspicious or if someone is behaving in a way that seems abusive or concerning. I think it's extremely important that we put that out in the open and say, what should we do about this person? I think as a community of feminists, I think we have a responsibility to younger people, more vulnerable people, to really hold people accountable for the things that they do that are concerning. And I think that we really can't afford to give people the benefit of the doubt, which is what I kind of see people doing towards Artie, because he's been nice or because they're friends. I think a huge part of safeguarding is actually understanding that someone can be the nicest, friendliest, best activist ever, but they can still be not who you thought they were. And in fact, I think that people who are abusive or whatever, they have a tendency to portray themselves as being really great. And I think that in Artie's response, when he was talking about how much he stood up against NAMBLA and things like that, I don't think it's okay to let people say, I can't be a bad person because I've done all these good things, and look at all this stuff that I've done for this community and for other people. It's like, there can be smoke screens, there can be, things to misdirect. It's kind of how these bad people can operate. And I don't want to say this about Artie directly, I suppose, but I really think that these things are red flags that need to be addressed. And I'm really happy that this space has been hosted and people can discuss it. That's all I wanted to say.
Okay, thanks for talking. Safe Schools, I'm so sorry I accidentally skipped you, so now it's your turn.
Hi, thank you for having me here. It's been really interesting listening to everyone talking and all their different perspectives, so thank you for that. Obviously, our group, we concentrate on safeguarding, and we do find that safeguarding is really poorly understood, both in wider society and even within our own movement. And we think people need to be very clear about what is the difference between having a disagreement with somebody and raising a safeguarding concern. And we do need to have mechanisms within the movement for raising safeguarding concerns, particularly quite official groups who are speaking to government. They need to have proper policies so that people can go through a proper procedure if they have concerns and raise them and have them dealt with like you would in a school or anywhere else. We can certainly see the arguments that it's not appropriate for these things to be raised on Twitter and that people feel bullied, but there does have to be a procedure for raising concerns that people have, and they do have to be taken seriously. I mean, we're in the UK and the government has just put out new guidance for schools on dealing with low-level concerns, which would be just those little niggly things that you're not sure whether it's a problem or not, but it might be. So for the safety of children, you have to raise those little niggles. So it's certainly not appropriate to say that you can only say you're concerned about someone once that has been proved beyond reasonable doubt. That's not how safeguarding works. We have to take action at those first little niggles so that children are not harmed. You don't wait for children to be harmed. You have to take notice of the people raising concerns. So really what we wanted to say is that it's very important that as a movement, as a whole, and each individual group, people need to have procedures put in place so that people know what to do if they have a concern, they know how they can raise it. They know that it will be taken seriously, so that we don't need to have these Twitter blow-ups. So thank you very much. That was just what we wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing that. It's very appreciated, sharing your perspective. Now we're going to have Frau Fantastic. It's your turn.
Thank you. Firstly, I really want to say thanks to Lorelei and Daiki McDaiki, great name, for hosting. Really appreciate it. A point was made about Bjork. I think there's something different about artists here. Bjork's free to use whatever artwork she likes. And I would show a piece of artwork that I can't abide is Marcus Harvey, who created a picture of Myra Hindley, who used infants' handprints to make that picture. But they're artists. They do not represent LGB Alliance or LGB Alliance Canada. Artie Morty does. He's also chosen to make himself a social media personality. That comes with responsibilities. Responsibilities that artists who don't represent anybody else make, and responsibilities that regular people, regular in inverted commas, also don't have. I'll leave it there and let other people speak. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for sharing. Next, we're going to have the Fat Sparrow Cult. Fat Sparrow Cult, did you want to speak?
Sorry, hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
I don't know if you can hear me or not, but I'm going to speak.
Yep.
I came along to this discussion today to actually raise a particular point, but I have to say I've been very, very, very disappointed, even alarmed at what I've heard so far. As somebody who's dealt with issues around pedophilia since the age of 5, as somebody who's been involved in articulating the behaviour of pedophiles, how they groom both the environment and their targets, having been involved in taking down a number of them, including in the UK, a charity funded by government, which was nothing but a paedophile ring, where every single person involved was a time-served convicted paedophile. And it had been completely missed. It was one of the foundations of getting safeguarding in place in the UK. I'm shocked. I have to say, I back Stella 100% in her view that careless talk has occurred and been totally inappropriate. And taking suppositions and using certain thought-terminating cliches like dog whistle to justify something has been totally and utterly appalling. But what I did come in to discuss about was something which is patently visible to me and to other people. But if we raise it, we get attacked very, very, very quickly indeed. And that is something which comes from studying evolutionary psychology. And of course, if you say this, it's a big red flag. You know, men and women are different. They're also different in the way they react to things. And the question has been raised about why Artie has behaved the way he has. I'm not surprised. When men are attacked, when men are subject to mobbing, when men are subject to various patterns of behaviour, they withdraw. Because what they fear more than anything else is reputational damage. Men and women are different in this. Women, when they are attacked, fear physical danger. I've been raising over Dr. Adrian Harrop's tribunal that the GMC have been completely negligent in their conduct, and that they didn't bring in experts, such as Professor Emma Short at De Montfort University, one of the leading experts on the planet in online stalking and abuse. And anybody who has any idea of the subject, looking at the evidence from the GMC, immediately saw incredibly dangerous information that was never properly articulated to the GMC. And it's no surprise to me that there were two men, that would be Mr. Harrop, and as I call them, the flying shyster, attacking a woman. And the two men were behaving one way and the one was behaving a different. This equality thing that comes in, where apparently you have to view everything in parity, which is daft, because that is not how human behaviour works. It's never worked that way. And so I can understand people looking at certain things and saying, we want an answer. And above all else, I can understand why Artie, whether he's guilty, innocent, whatever, would back off. And that is because men are different to women. And so holding, for want of a better term, a star chamber and an open court, without there being any rules whatsoever, I'm not surprised it's ended up here. And I'm disgusted by it. Absolutely disgusted. And unless certain people start peddling back quickly, and I'm saying this very publicly, it appears that certain people are driving a wedge right into the LGB alliance to hive off bits for their own control. Not interested. Time to stand back and start dealing with what the LGB alliance has been about and what they're focusing on, and not having all the extra drama. If you want the drama, please have it privately elsewhere. But stop making the whole community and the work that people have put in place to actually move forward part of other people's drama. It's not acceptable. Okay?
Okay, thanks for sharing your perspective. Oh, I thought I added someone up. Sorry, give me a second. I'm adding someone.
Thank you for doing this.
Oh, yeah, I'm happy to facilitate. So, Ephemera, you're next when you connect. And then it's going to be Frank, Black. Ephemera, you can go when you're ready.
Okay, so really
Can anyone hear what she's saying? Or is it just me?
No.
Okay, so I'm sorry, Ephemera, but it looks like... Oh, did she leave? It looks like you're having technical difficulties. If you could try and connect to different Wi-Fi or like leave the chat and come back, maybe. I'll let you speak again. Oh, maybe it's okay now?
Just going to go with it. Friend, so if I go down the body, I would just like to say, I was going back to the beginning. I'm not too right? Studying English and he's not able to do the books and stuff at Adriansville and Tivoli. And as the time progressed, I learned things that they don't put in history books. And Hadrian, whether are things or not, and it's possible people don't know because you probably know.
Okay. Okay. Frank Black, why don't you go next?
Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, thank you. I joined the conversation because I think it's really important to discuss the AGP situation. And I think, both on behalf of parents who've got young children who are starting to display signs of this, they really need some help because it is a paraphilia. And if it's not dealt with earlier on in teens at those stages of development, we end up with situations, and it was very difficult to listen to Pippi explaining the situation of being a trans widow, all she's been through. And discussing AGP really is an important issue. And I think we need to have this conversation again. We need to have Stella in to give her contribution. I'd have liked to have heard what Tanya Marshall might have been able to say with her experience on autism and gender dysphoria. With the Artie Morty thing, I'm not going to take any sides. I think he inadvertently, he opened a can of worms because what he was referring to is pederasty. And I think there needs to be a separate conversation, and maybe other members of the gay community can partake in this, because it's often said that homosexuality was rife amongst the Greek and Roman world. It very possibly was, but pederasty needs some serious discussion, and it's not what some people think it is. And it does, for me, raise a few concerns. And I really understand why mothers and feminists are really concerned that there should be any kind of putting pederasty on any kind of a pedestal. I think it's a misunderstanding of history and a misquoting, but that's a separate conversation. And I feel a lot of this conversation opportunity has been lost today. And I would really look forward to another conversation about the organophilia and paraphilias, and particularly how we can support young people so that they can address this. That's my view. Yes, I'm a but I'm not going to get angry at that. But I think we need this conversation. We need to focus on the AGP. That's it.
Okay, thanks for your comment. Okay, so now we're going to hear from Sabertooth Rabbit. Sabertooth Rabbit, do you have something to say? Okay. So Sabertooth Rabbit, I guess you don't have anything to say, so Danny, why don't you go?
Hi, thank you for letting me speak. I know I don't really have much of a Twitter history on this account because my two anonymous accounts have been banned for saying, basic facts, which we all know is a thing. I have two things to say on this whole thing. One about the AGP and one about the ARTI. With the AGP, obviously, we need to understand things from an intellectual perspective, from a scientific perspective, but we don't need to normalize them. And I know a lot of women agree with me on this. And the thing I think that we are concerned about when this is brought up is how much more do we need to understand about this paraphilia before we tell men that it is unacceptable to involve women without our consent in public spaces. That's it. That's all it comes down to. I can be sympathetic if you keep it in your bedroom. I don't care what you do when you are not in front of my face. But if you are forcing me to lie, if you are forcing me to participate, yeah, I care a lot. So that's the thing about AGP. The second thing is going to be specifically about the ARTI situation. I'm a straight woman. I do not, I have a niece that is trans-identified, which is how this affects me personally. But I also have a decade of domestic abuse with a BDSM narc. So I do understand a little bit of this kind of thing. And that's kind of what piqued me, is I saw so many similarities between how I was treated by my ex-husband and how the TRAs treat women. What Artie did was make a stupid tweet accusing Radfems of bloodlust. And that hasn't been discussed. He came back and said, I was drunk, I'm sorry, it wasn't me. And for anyone who's been in an abusive relationship, that's bullshit. We have heard that too many times. I have heard too many times, oh, but I was drunk. Oh, but I won't do it again. Oh, but. You know, the Hadrian and Antinous thing, yeah, I get it's a dog whistle. I get, the arguments on both sides. But I also understand what an earlier speaker, and forgive me for forgetting who, spoke about patterns. If it was just this one thing in the bio, it wouldn't be an issue. If it was just this one thing here. But it is a pattern of behavior. And women who have been on the wrong end of abuse see this way too easily. I am not going to genuflect at the altar of Artie Morty because he's done good things when I see behaviors that are so damaging to women and children. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Hello? Hello?
We can hear you. Saber Truth Robin.
Can you hear me? The thing I wanted to discuss really was this thing about the bullying. I think what is being forgotten here is that Artie was involved with another couple of men who were actually goading a very litigious... Yeah. Sorry. Hello?
Keep talking, we can hear you.
Hello?
We can hear you, Saber.
Hello. I just think that we can't forget that there was a person involved in this, and she was put upon and targeted and encouraged by a group who included Artie for a well-known litigious AGP to go after her illegally. You can't be doing that. It's out of order. And also, anything I want to know about AGPs, I will know, or I need to do as a feminist, as I'll learn it from people like Pippi. That's all I've got to say.
Okay, thanks for sharing. Can you please just make sure you mute your mic when you're done speaking? Next, we're going to hear from Lilac. And then after that, we're going to hear from Heather. Sorry, my screen keeps freezing.
Lilac, you need to turn your mic on.
Oh, sorry, I didn't realize I was up next. Can you guys hear me? Oh, so sorry, is it me that's up next?
Yep, go for it.
Yes, keep talking.
Oh, okay, sorry. My internet isn't great, so I didn't hear whoever was telling me that I was up next. I was just going to say something, I guess, kind of related to the Artie Morty situation, except I'm not really that big on kind of, I don't know, making personal accusations. I'm not in Canada, obviously, so this is more just kind of a general point about something that I've seen people having a lack of understanding of, which is the kind of glorification of a historical pedophilic relationship. I am someone who was kind of a victim of online grooming by an older man when I was in my preteens. And one of the things that kind of enabled that to happen was cultural messaging that was quite pervasive, that was sort of condoning pedophilia in kind of a subtle way. Like, oh, look at this age gap couple, they're so wholesome, the younger woman is so mature and she can keep up with the older man, our age is just a number, pedophilia used to be okay in history, this is just modern morals being puritanical, sort of this kind of subtle ideas being pushed by some online subcultures that I was in that made me kind of feel like what was happening was okay and made me not realize how not okay it really was. And I think I'm not accusing Artie Morty or anyone else of deliberately trying to normalize pedophilia. Like, I'm sure that he is well-meaning and that he doesn't understand the implications, I guess, of doing something that could be interpreted as glorifying a pedophilic couple. But I think it's kind of important to listen to people who have been through child grooming and things like that, and listen to our experiences of what kind of cultural messaging enabled that and not dismiss it as trivial. So I was here earlier when Stella was speaking, and it did seem very dismissive to just say we should be talking about AGP, we shouldn't be talking about this isn't a big deal, because I think while it may not be a big deal on its own, these very subtle cultural messages saying that pedophilia can be okay, like it was okay at that point in history, it wasn't that bad, we can ignore the fact that it was pedophilic, we can just call it a gay couple and like just kind of skim over the fact that it was pedophilic. I think that is messaging that can contribute to a general cultural climate of normalization. Like, I'm not accusing anyone of pedophilia apologism or of doing this on purpose, but it's just something that's important for people to try and understand. I guess that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you for that. Who was going to speak next?
Okay, thanks for sharing. Sorry, Lorelai, what was that?
No, I was just saying who was going to speak next because I wondered if your internet was all right. So I think it was Jack, so I'll mute myself.
Hello?
Teresa, you can go.
Hi, I just wanted to say that, big support from the, straight man community. It's... Anyway.
Teresa was next.
Okay, can I go now? I just wanted to say that we as feminists don't need to discuss AGP men, what they do, what they don't do. We need to listen to the trans widows, to their kids. We need to support women. And we need to get back to centering women in our feminism. Because if we go on centering men, we'll always be here on a Saturday evening, wasting our time listening to people getting upset because we haven't centered the men enough. Artie can do and say what he wants. Artie, for me, has always raised red flags. And this is just the latest in a long line of things that he's said and done that I don't like. So that's all I want to say. I stand with trans widows and trans widows' children and not AGP men.
Steve Veal next.
Hi, thank you for listening to me. I didn't intend to talk today, and this is the first space I've attended, but a couple of things have come up I just feel I want to talk about. The first is Artie. I've not watched The Mess We're In. I don't think I've seen a single episode, although I am inured in this whole gender critical movement for the last few years. And it just strikes me that if you didn't know him and you read what he'd said, you'd all be posting red flags all over Twitter. Moving on from there, if it seems to me, I mean, this is a battle that everyone's fighting, and it's one that has to be won. The movement has to be like a team, and a team needs a captain. And over the last couple of years, there have been so many schisms. The movement seems to be divided into about 3 groups. And it needs to unite in one way. You've had the academics, Posey Parker and everyone else. And between them, it just seems you're getting nowhere. And this isn't for blokes to decide. This isn't for men like me. But I think someone has to come out as the spokesperson, as the leader. And I feel that is the route to protecting, our women, our daughters, our granddaughters, and so on. That's really all I wanted to say today. And just like to thank you for doing this, and thank you for the time.
Benji is having trouble with... so who's going to speak next? Does anyone remember who was next in the queue? No? Okay, does anyone want to speak? I think it's stuttering. I don't even know if you can hear me, actually. Oh. Greta, can you speak next? I don't know who was next in the queue, but I know you requested.
I'll go next. Hi everyone. I think the point that was made about a leader is interesting. I'm not going to declare myself leader here and now, but I think there have been some interesting points raised from what I've heard today, and I feel like I just wanted to say really that I feel like the theme is perhaps male sexual entitlement, and there are maybe some interesting discussions to be had about where the line is drawn between freedom, free expression, everything like this, and entitlement. And I'm not sure we're 100% there, and I'm sure we won't, people will never agree on these things entirely, but that just seems to me like
the theme. That's the key area of discussion.
Yes, we can hear you.
Excellent, thank you. This has been really fascinating, and I've loved hearing perspectives from most people. But I guess what I really wanted to say, and the reason this kind of was of interest to me, and the reason this kind of come up, is because, you know, being called bullies and making out that we're on some kind of witch hunt because Artie had made these comments, not just one. He's made a few and had several forays that we've been witness to, that we've called out, and it just so happens that hundreds, possibly thousands of women and men have expressed their opinion or their concern or their anger at what he's had to say at once, individually. There's no backroom deal to pile on Artie. And when I think it was Fat Sparrow had said that Artie withdrew, and we were met with friends of his who basically said we had to get off his back because he was a really nice guy, and that we really shouldn't be saying all these things because, you know, there's a lot of pressure on him and things like that, and he's suffering awfully. And for me to not be able to talk or call out AGP apologists or someone who's asking us to be empathetic or badgering trans widows or rubbishing claims of paedophile apology or any of those things. We are told this on a daily basis, that we need to be quiet, that we need to participate, that we need to understand that this is difficult for men. And then for fellow feminists and friends, then putting out graphics that are basically saying that we are bullies and that we have partaken in bullying and piling on because our gut told us all simultaneously, this is not good, this is a red flag, and we really need to address this, especially if it's someone on our side. Because if we don't do that, then we are just an anti-trans movement, as we are accused of being. If we can't call out our side and say, hold on, wait a minute, this is a problem, then we are everything we claim, and really, really try hard to not be seen as. We are met with these accusations every single day that we are bloodlusting after AGPs, that we want these people dead, that we've got no skin in the game, we don't know what we're talking about, that we're mindless bullying witches. All these things are so triggering. And when you've got people like Pippi, who, my goodness, my heart goes out, what a heartfelt testimony she gave. When we're told that we can't speak out about this, that we don't know our own minds, and that we have to entertain this, not just on Twitter, but in our everyday lives, in our spaces, in the spaces of our children, all these things, it leaves a really, really triggered bad taste in our mouths. And we get more and more and more on the back foot. So to be told that we are bullies and to have graphics put out, not just by feminists, but then for Debbie Hayton to then put that out, who again has been talking about AGP, talks out about it as openly AGP, is also very triggering, especially when we're told, oh, we don't understand enough about this. I think it was Danny that said earlier, we absolutely understand plenty about this. And I think that's what's really bothering us. The fact that these little things are being drip fed, that these little things are going under the radar, that we have people coming out and saying, oh, but he's a really nice guy, he's done all of this stuff, he's really helped you out. Again, that's a trigger for anyone who's dealt with someone who's abusive. That is exactly what they would say. And again, the excuse, it wasn't me, I was drunk. Drunk mind, sober heart. So I took that to heart. I took that as really being how he felt about the women in the movement. And yeah, I don't like this being labelled that we're, witches, this is some kind of, and that we're, a pack of bullies that really just want to make Artie's life difficult. For some reason we've picked him. No, it's because there's been a series of red flags. Everybody's went off at once, and we have addressed it, and we are addressing it. And I'm really thankful and grateful to the hosts this evening. Thank you for letting me speak, and thank you for listening, and thank you guys for sharing. That's me.
Thank you so much. We're having some technical difficulties over here. Estella, perhaps if you'll speak, and perhaps when we run out of speakers, we'll just wrap it up for this evening. So Estella, I think you're next, and then I don't know who else just requested to be speaking, but if it's you, then you're after Estella.
Okay, hi there. I didn't know I had to activate my mic. I can be a bit of a Luddite. But by the way, sorry for my trans English. It's English, but it can be difficult at times. Anyway, I just want to reiterate what Greta said about lines and drawing a line. Like, I'm definitely someone who is mindful about the perils of cancel culture and purity spirals and everything, but precisely because I'm mindful of that, I'm not going to call every single disagreement canceling or a purity spiral, because that's just nonsense and it's lazy reasoning. And it doesn't mean being mindful of not being unfair to someone, of not accusing someone without hearing them first. All of that is great. But that doesn't mean you just go, oh, so no lines there, no boundaries. No. I mean, that's certainly something easy to do, so I understand the appeal. And frankly, I think I've gotten quite annoyed at times when I was hearing some bits of Stella's point. I've enjoyed hearing her perspective, mind you, but I got a bit annoyed with this whole bit about we're accusing him of being a pedophile. No, we're not accusing him of that. The thing is, if he wants to go ahead, because at best the most generous interpretation of this series of red flags or this series of signs we've had with Artie is that he's a bit of either clueless or frankly even a bit of a provocateur. So he has this bio and his interests are all supposedly to be controversial. Well, it's not controversial to like Wagner. We'll know that the fascist can make great music. So as someone else pointed out, that's a false analogy. Because he isn't saying, well, I love Hadrian's Wall, I love Roman sculptures. He's actually liking, having as an interest, a real life situation between two people, one of them an old guy and his kid, lover / his actual slave, who was a kid. So anyway, I'll ramble. Basically, I think all the time we are running to this wall where whenever we want to draw a boundary or say, well, this shit won't fly in this movement, like, sure, go ahead and say whatever you want to say on a personal note, but hey, maybe you shouldn't be in charge of an LGBT alliance, because then you're not speaking in a personal capacity. You're speaking as a rep for that organization, and yeah, respectability matters. Then we get accused of, oh, but what about free speech? Well, cancel culture. And we are, as a group, I think, if we can call this white Durgisi movement a movement or a group, which I think maybe we cannot, we are particularly sensitive to those accusations. So it's easy to shut us up whenever it's like, oh,
don't participate in pride laws. I know I'm sensitive to that. And I'm, if anything, very careful not to overdraw lines, not to beat a dead horse, all of that. But as I said, that doesn't mean we don't get to robustly criticize or say, well, maybe that's actual inappropriate shit. And it's nothing personal. It's just, we're gonna talk about it. And sure, we don't need to go on and on and on. In fact, I wasn't gonna weigh in on this, but then I saw these ridiculous accusations of bullying. And to be fair, I think there are points of the letter that I could have probably worded differently. I could nitpick endlessly, because that's what I do. But at this point, I'm not going to do that. Because this dramatic accusation of you're bullying him, that's, if we're gonna play this, oh, you're counseling him, you're demonizing him, what are you doing? You're being dramatic. Well, you are being dramatic in characterizing robust criticism as some sort of witch hunt and as bullying as whatnot. So yeah, sorry, I took too long to say that. It was lovely hearing you all. And yeah, there's that.
Okay, thanks for sharing, Stella. Next, we're going to hear from Jennifer.
Sorry about that. My mic wouldn't go on. I have just a short question. For Alliance, so LGBT Alliance for Canada, so Artie is our spokesperson. Is that what is that sort of what I understand? The reason I ask is that I'm curious as to who else is leading as our female representative, lesbians and bisexual. I've always been extremely concerned about a man speaking up for a group that includes women. So sometimes I'm frustrated that we are looped in with the men, but that's that. My main question, I was wondering if it couldn't be answered by the host or co-host, is who do we have as our spokeswoman in LGBT Alliance Canada? That's it. So thanks so much if you don't mind answering, and I appreciate it. Cheers.
As far as I'm aware, the people that were originally in LGBT Alliance Canada, I mean, the women, most of them are no longer in LGBT Alliance Canada. There is one woman left, but the last time I spoke to her, she said she was being ignored. So I didn't really want to get into like the internals of what, like those kind of things, but it seems to me that, if LGBT Alliance UK is going to address this, that it will somehow, change the internal structure of LGBT Alliance Canada. And yeah, sorry, I don't really know exactly how to answer your question with the information I have. I hope that was somewhat helpful. Isle of Lesbos, you've raised your hand, so why don't you go? And then after that, we're going to let some other people go.
I know when this whole discussion was brought up, I was encouraging people to go to the individuals that this affected, and one of them was LGBT Alliance. So for the people that were concerned about what was going on in LGBT Alliance Canada, I asked them to reach out to LGBT Alliance Bev or to Allison or whoever is a representative there, because I'm of the firm belief that if there is an issue, I would prefer to go to the person or the organization that I have an issue with, and I personally don't like public pile-ons myself. And I would like to add that when there are red flags or I have concerns, I will bring it up with the person or the individual or the organization that my concern is about, and I will try to deal with it behind the scenes as opposed to making it public. Now, what happened once the individuals approached whoever, I do not know what the outcome was of that, and I do not know what prompted them for the letter to be written, but nonetheless, it doesn't take away from what the concern is. And from what I originally heard is that at least for the Twitter account and for the Instagram account, and I might be wrong, but I was under the impression that Artie was the one that had the login information and the control of social media, which might also expand to Facebook. So that's all I want to mention.
Okay, thanks for your comment. So LGB Alliance has joined us. So go for it.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hi, everybody. Sorry to disappoint the last speaker. It's not Bev, it's not Alison, but it's Kate, one of the two lesbian co-founders of LGB Alliance. I'm not going to say very much, but I will say a couple of things. The reason I'm not going to say very much is because there's been a surge in the last few hours of tweets against LGB Alliance from people who have a long track record of trying to silence us and destroy us and tear us down. And we fight a daily battle for survival. And they are listening. They are on this call. So I'm going to limit my comments very deliberately. The first thing I'd like to say is that to any Canadians who would like to join us in strengthening LGBT Alliance Canada, please DM us. Our DMs are open. We've had a struggle in the USA and in Canada to get LGBT Alliance really established. And it's not surprising. It's been a nightmare, and it's a continuing battle for survival in Turf Island, which is where I live. But in those countries who are receiving some of the most horrendous treatment from government and from people who should know better, it is an even harder struggle. So if you support our fight against lesbian erasure, please DM us. Tell us that you'd like to get on a call to talk about LGBT Alliance Canada, and we will join you with great enthusiasm. The other thing that I would say is that we are lesbian-led, we are lesbian-focused, we are women-centred, but we decided that we would work with men. And I think you all know the reason for that is because when you work with men, you get greater results. We can have a whole Twitter discussion on why that is. But I recognise that as a reality, and I hope you support what we do, because we support all the lesbian separatist groups for doing what they're doing. We have to fight this battle in whichever way is best for us. So thank you to all the lesbian separatists for all the work that you do. Thank you for all of you who have decided to support LGBT Alliance, which has taken the decision that we will be for lesbians, for gay men, and for bisexuals. And our job is to stop the erasure of lesbians and to stop the continuing medicalisation, the destruction of the lives, particularly of young lesbians. And finally, if you are, as lesbian feminists and anybody else, keen to fight this war, let's be very, very careful and very, very clear about who our targets are. Let's make those targets the people who have a record destroying the lives of women and destroying the lives of children. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for speaking, LGB Alliance. Is there anyone else who wants to speak before we wrap it up?
Can you raise your hand?
Oh, Anandami.
Anandamide. Sorry, I'm a chemist. So.
Sorry.
No worries. I just wanted to pop in real quick and say, I agree with a lot of what's been said here, and it's nice to hear so many people speaking up and having their say. I do, however, feel one thing that always gets lost in the discussion is that we're always back-footed. We're always on the defensive, and really, as a movement, I wish we were focused more on the offense. The same thing like what happened with the lesbian article that came out, and everyone started talking about Lily Cade, and it was all just, we disown her. And honestly, sometimes with these things, the answer should just be yeah, and let's move on. Let's focus on the issues at hand and not get lost, lose the forest for the trees here, because that seems like it happens an awful lot, especially on Twitter. And I wish we were focused a little more on the bigger picture. It's good to have everyone say what needs to be said, but ultimately we're here for the same reason. I don't know. That's really it.
Thank you. We have two more speakers. We have Kelly, who's had her hand up for ages, and then Parents Against Scotland, and then I think we'll end it for today. Kelly, are you there? Yeah, Parents Against Scotland. If you
Could I? Yeah, hi. I'm not against Scotland. I'm across Scotland. Although I might be against Scotland at the minute.
I'm very sorry.
That's all right. I was just wondering if there's any advice or links to any resources that anyone might have for young lesbians going through school or coming up against this situation. I'm just considering what Stella said right back at the start, that she's dealing with a lot of AGP teenagers. So I think a lot of what we're talking about is aimed at older people, and I just wondered if anyone knew of anything that young sort of teenage lesbians would actually be able to look at and where we can refer them to, because they're going to be the ones that are kind of caught in this situation. If the increase in AGP teenagers is actually causing a concern at the moment.
There is nothing at the moment.
So there's nothing? No.
No, but LGB Alliance is just setting up our first meeting to discuss a pilot for precisely that, because there is nothing for people who think they may be LGB. There's nowhere for them to go. There's nowhere for a child to talk about these issues sensibly. So there's a hell of a lot of work to do, and that's part of it.
Oh, brilliant. It's good to hear that there is work being done on it. I just speak from my own daughter, from her side of it. So that's great to hear that, not great to hear that there's no work being done, but certainly that there's work looking at that area. Thanks.
So this feels like, to me, maybe a good time to wrap it up.
I think if Kelly is here, she should get to speak, and Safe Schools Alliance as well.
Okay, yep, Kelly and then Safe School.
Yeah, we can hear you, Kelly, but you're very distant.
Sorry, can you hear me better now?
Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry, my daughter came running in at the exact time you asked me if I was available. So a lot of people have spoken on the arts situation, have spoken on the AGP situation, and how do we separate what is classically known as AGP to what we see now as the young cohort of men who could be classed as AGP, but what's affecting them? Like, is it the same? For me, the situation around Archie, and I'm so sorry to go back to it. It's not necessarily that he himself is a proponent of bad or negative or horrible ideas. It's that he is expressing things that people are upset about. And I'm sorry if I'm sorry, I'm 65, I have 2 4-year-olds. It's more about asking him to answer questions that aren't being answered necessarily. But I don't want to just ramble on because I realise I am not in the best mental state right now because my feet are frustrated. I can understand where Canada stands and people from Canada, women especially, stand when it comes to RT and the views expressed or perhaps not explained, and how that can translate across the borders, places like this, such as the UK, the EU, or the US, and how that can change depending on where you are. If you're in Canada, it's very much a case of do what the person is certain of. People outside of Canada, it's a case of explaining. And that hasn't come forward without any transgender towards women. I'm sorry if I'm rambling on. My children are running about in my food. But really, when it comes down to it, I do not think RT is necessarily a problematic person. I think perhaps he's defensive in areas where people would like to hear an explanation. I know Twitter is not the best place for people to put forward their ideas or their explanations about why they have a preference or an idealization or even just a preference. Sorry, I'm rambling on. But really, when it comes down to it, people in the UK cannot appreciate where people in Canada are coming from necessarily, you're not there. People in the US cannot appreciate where people in Canada are coming from, they're not there. And really, at the end of the day, same women from Canada have concerns or bullied or instigated division because they disagree with artistic. I'm sorry, I had a whole thing planned out and I can't express it well. But really, I think what he's saying is for Canada, especially for the women in Canada, for RT, and the whole situation around AGP and the NK situation, the whole story around that, and the NAMBLA and 5 rhetoric that repeats the things that he has expressed and interesting, but at the same time expressing again. A conversation needs to happen outside of the situation on spaces on Twitter. And if RT could do that head on, that would probably help. I'm so sorry that this is a rambling speech, but I have been running around after my things all day. I'm exhausted and I realise when my ramble here. So mute me now if you feel free. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for sharing. Safe schools.
Hey, I just wanted to answer parents across Scotland. There is a website called Positively Lesbian, which is for supporting young lesbians. I don't know whether they do 16 plus or 18 plus, but there should be a link on our website, and that's a good website for teachers to read about how they can support young girls in their care. And I believe Lesbian Rights Alliance also have some groups for young lesbians. I think, again, I'm not sure whether they do from 16 plus or 18 plus. And I believe Lesbian Labour are also looking at younger groups too. So there should be links to most of those on our website. If not, Google them. And like LGB Alliance said, they're also looking at stuff. So there is some support out there, and hopefully there should be more coming soon. If anyone is aware of any other support, please do let us know so we can signpost people to it. Okay, thank you.
Magic, thanks so much.
Okay, I just wanted to say one thing that I meant to say before I didn't say. I think that LGBT people, we need to be conscious of where we are drawing the line of what is and is not acceptable. Like someone was saying before, I don't know what they were saying, but basically, like, if there's no actual victim yet, then what are you talking about? And I don't think that we need to decide where we draw the line, and I don't think it should be once something bad has happened. I think we need to be vigilant and self-regulate before bad things happen. I'm not sure if I articulated that very well. But thank you everyone for coming. This was very emotional for a lot of people. I think we did pretty okay. If you didn't get a chance to talk and use things you want to say, I'm going to be hosting a space next. It's not going to be as formal or organized, probably, but if you want, you can come to that. Lorelai, anything you want to say?
Yes, just thank you everyone for attending and everyone who spoke. It was important to hear all of your words. And just thank you, really. And we will try and have other conversations again. I was speaking to one of the women in this movement earlier, and she was saying that we really need to have conversations that separate out all of these different issues and all of the different concerns so that people get to talk and we will get to consider things. So tonight was sort of everything at once, but perhaps in future we can have very measured discussions about all the different strands. So just thank you all really for being here.
Okay, cool. So I hope everyone can have a good afternoon or a good night or a good day wherever you are.
Thank you. Bye.